do a little tutorial here on how to improve some texture maps with some custom brushes in Photoshop for DAZ Studio. I am running the 4.9 public beta build here on DAZ. I'm using the Lycanthropus Night Wolf or something like that for this tutorial. The reason why I picked him is because he does have some nice mats. You can see where the skin and the fur meet. But to me, a werewolf should have a pretty scruffy, long scruff or a ruff around his neck and his shoulders. And yeah, the short fur around the arms and legs where the skin meets the fur, so on and so forth. But I'm going to do a little bit of fur on his back. Let's do a quick spot render here and see what it looks like without any changes. These are set up for 3D Light, iRender, and iRay. So, but they still render pretty nice, as you can see. It's got very nice translucency with the skin and the fur. It's just too short for my taste. So I decided to use him for an example here. Now, what we're going to do under the Surfaces tab, we're going to find that matte for his back. And as you can see, there's a bump map. And everything else is set up for 3D Light, you know, nothing spectacular here. So, one thing you can think about doing, you might, be your first response, is to just change the settings to iRay. We could go to the DAZ Uber and change it to the iRay settings there. That would leave all of our mats in place. But one of the things I have is this fur for iRay package. I've been wanting to try. The only thing I don't like about it is trying to tell what types of fur we have going on here with just that little tiny sample. It's hard to tell. But that kind of looks wolfy there. L. Okay, maybe not. Well, let's see what it renders like. There's still a faint hope here. Yes, it is faint. I think I have a blanket that looks like that, except for it's brown. Anyways, that's not going to work for our Wolfie. But I do like the fur texture. It does give a lot of depth there, even though the fur is not the style or the type or the color that I want. So I go and I find our original mat that has his back on there. Go to Browse, and you can see I've already created my shortcuts. But find the map you want, right-click, create shortcut, and then move them to your desktop. This way, I do it this way because if you have a scene with a lot of textures you want to change, more than one thing, doing it this way keeps you from bouncing back and forth and doing the hunt and find with the actual textures that you need. Then we're going to save and close and then go into Photoshop. Alright, I'm using Photoshop CC here, and you'll have to pardon me, I've been sick, running a fever, and I totally zoned on starting my recording when I started working here. So as you can see, I've got a little bit fur put down, but I remembered to turn it on. So here I'm switching the layer blending mode to multiply. Therefore, every time I put color down, it gets gradually darker and darker. Now, I'm trying to do my best to stick as closely as I can to the hair growth pattern. This adds just a lot of realism. You'd be surprised. And it's not something you can put your finger on immediately, but when you get it wrong, people will look at it and they might not know exactly what it is, but they'll spot it. Whereas this adds a lot of detail and it's very subtle. People go, oh wow, that's cool. It adds a lot of realism. And I've sped up the video here so we don't sit here watch paint dry. But I'm basically putting down just the base coat. I work in layers, and this is another reason why I shouldn't have done this while I was sick, because I am an advocate of using multiple layers. Every time I change colors, change the blending mode, change the brush, I'm starting a new layer. That gives me a lot of control later on, and I'll show you why later on. But dummy me here, I just got working and forgot to change my layers. So this is a perfect example of do as I say, not as I do. Anyways, I'm going to move over here and work on the tail. Now this is going to require a longer, fluffier look for the tail. And just again, keeping it on blending mode. Multiply, I've got the opacity at 100%. Here I'm going to go ahead and change the brush. Now I should be changing the layer, starting a new layer with this, but I didn't. As you can see, and I'm still haven't quite shaken this bug I've got. And you can see how a difference it makes when you work with the hair detail and go with the hair growth pattern. These brushes definitely work better with short strokes, again, multiple layers. If you can use a mouse to do this, you can paint with a mouse. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it works so much better with a graphics tablet, so I highly recommend that you get one. I use a Wacom Pen and Touch Medium, which is wonderful for drawing. There's plenty of room for my hand. It didn't break the bank, and I got a little wireless accessory to go with it, and I really, really like it. But typically for most people, once you start painting with a graphics tablet, you'll never go back to painting with a mouse. And now we're putting in another color, lightening up the details on his head. You notice though, even though I've changed brushes, I haven't changed the color yet. I've just been using multiply and screen on the brush blending modes. Now here, I change color. And that's another thing, don't be afraid to change brush sizes, experiment with your blending modes, experiment with layer blending modes, move layers around. You get a lot more control with opacity, for example. Keep your opacities low. You're not getting as much color down on the screen. You can fine tune it a little easier. So experiment, experiment. These brushes do take a little bit of practice to get the hang of them. Also, don't worry about going outside the lines. I rarely color inside the lines. Um, but if you do have to get rid of something that you got carried away on and went over the line, use layer mask to get rid of it. It makes it easier and you don't accidentally erase something that you need. Now, I was having a hard time with getting the brush to follow the hair growth pattern, so I just rotated the entire image. So it's going in the direction that I want it to go, and it makes it easier for me to uh, sketch down the hair or the fur. Um, I just remember to put it back when I'm done here. And basically that's what I do. I keep working back and forth until I get the look and the detail that I like. Again, it's a matter of preference for every artist, what you're coloring. I do recommend using photo references whenever you get a chance. It adds a lot of realism. I've done a lot of realistic equine sculpture painting, and I always used a photo reference. Kind of fast and loose with the tutorial here to get it down because I know there's a lot of people who had requested this on the DAS forums. They need it, and I'm trying to get it to them as quickly as possible. And you can see just switching, even though I'm not changing layers like I should, just changing the blending modes on the brush and a few colors here and there adds a huge amount of depth. Now I'm going with the light gray for a guard hair highlight. Actually, he's kind of looking like a more tan than black German Shepherd, long-haired German Shepherd. So we're just going to add this little bit of detail. You can see it's really making it pop, that little light gray guard hair. All right, due to length considerations, I cut out quite a bit of video there, just of the same thing. Here I am copying the layers since I didn't make them like I was supposed to, and setting the layer blending mode for each. Even though I am just basically reiterating the same layer, I'm still getting a lot of variety by changing the blending modes here. And I really like this effect here. Gives a lot of depth and a lot of color. All right, before I merge my layers, I'm going to save our diffuse texture map. This is your main color map. And because Daz can read Photoshop files, I'm not bothering to change the file type. Now, after I save that, I'm going to come over here to the adjustments, and I want to change everything to black and white. For bump maps, normal maps, and so on, it's all about contrast, and you're going to get that most effectively with black and white. So now I'm going through the presets and deciding which one gives me the best contrast. Now that I've got that set, I add a strong contrast curves adjustment. And from here, I quickly save a displacement file. All I do is put displacement in the name of the file. But this is our setup that you want to create your bump and normal maps. First, we're going to create the normal. Now we come over here to our layers panel, right click, merge visible. We want one layer for this. Go to filter, 3D, and generate normal map. Photoshop will think for a little bit. Now, depending on your computer, if you got a fast computer, you can probably turn your detail scale up to 120%, which is what I've done. If you don't have the fastest computer, then you might not want to mess with that because sometimes Photoshop will crash on you when you adjust it. So save often. Now I adjust the arrow sliders. Again, this is the contrast of depth between our highs and lows. You can move the little circle around and check everything, but it looks good to me. So I click OK. Now the next thing I'm going to do is File, Save As, and I'm going to put normal or NRM in the file name so I know which one this is. And I'm also being sure to save it to my directory that I created specifically for this purple. Do not save over your original files. And there we go, NRM, so I can find it. And save. Now, from here, I go to my history list, And I bring it back a step so I can do the bump map. And again, that is filter, 3D, generate bump map. And it's the exact same process. The only thing I do not change on the bump map is the detail scale. I leave it as is. But that's going to be on a case by case basis. Again, I adjust the arrow sliders for contrast. And as before, check my little sphere there. And okay, now we have a bump map. Again, file save as, and I put BMP in the title so I know what I'm dealing with. And again, saving to my special directory for this. And that is it for Photoshop. We're going back to DAZ. Alrighty, now back over in DAZ, we open our scene, and under the Surfaces tab, we navigate again to where we need to put our maps. So first we're going to go to the base color, which is your diffuse color. And it sends us to the original file folder. I go to my custom folder and grab the texture that we made. And there he is. He's got a red fur back. And actually that looks pretty good. Now the next things I need to put in are like the tail, for example, but I also need to put in the bump map, the normal map, and the displacement map in their appropriate places. And since those are all pretty self-explanatory, I just went ahead and did those, and you can see they're in place already. So, notice here too, I still have the displacement map of this of the original iRay render of that gray fur that we did. So I've got to come in and put the displacement map that we made in Photoshop. Okay. Now let's do a quick spot render and see what we got going. And I did my best to speed up this process for the video. Didn't always work, but I did my best. Now, already I can see problems with this. Why is it green? It's also very, very textured. Now for me, this would work for a werewolf coat, but this is nothing like what we drew in Photoshop. So let's find out what's going on here. The first thing you want to check is not your mats, but your lighting, especially in iRay. And over here I'm using the Dimension Theory HDRI mesh light setup. I really like these lights. But because we're getting so much blue and green on the coat, I found the light that is the red color, and you can see it's facing him. That's why we're getting so much blue and green. So I just need to move that light. It has a point, a consistent point at a null that is right in front of him. So I leave that alone. I just moving the lights to get the red where it needs to be, just because that side's overwhelmed with blue and green. Now, let's go back to our default camera. And try another spot render real quick. And hey, that looks a lot better. It's amazing what just a simple lighting change can do. And with iRay, lighting is oh so important. So look there first when it comes to a color change. Okay, now while I think that this coat looks wonderful for a werewolf, again, it's still not exactly what we had drawn in Photoshop. It's too matted. Why is that? Well, the next thing I'm going to look at here is that displacement map that we made. So I come down to the displacement. Now my bump maps and normal maps are just fine. But see, remember, we still have the settings from that other fur, that IRA fur. And that's under the displacement where we get the most where it's really different. So easy for me to say, huh? What we're doing here is we are going to drop the displacement map completely and see what that does. As you can see, it did a lot for it. We got more of a long, smooth stroke, and actually that would be broken up a little bit and look more natural if I had followed my own advice and done the layers every time I changed brushes or changed blending modes. But again, as I said, do as I say, not as I do. And there is our final render. You can see the type of results you can get. If the displacement didn't work for you and adjusting those settings, look at your normal map, look at your bump map, you can adjust those settings, but ultimately you can go back and generate new bump and normal maps if you need to, and adjust those settings to kind of calm them down. It's all about experimentation. Do not be afraid to try different things, and good luck and happy painting.